Hey, what's up, Mavs fans? Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak of the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for my latest episode of Inside The Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast. I'm 97.1 The Freak here on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to like and comment on this video and also follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports and give the podcast a 5-star rating and write a review for it. For Inside the Mavs, the Mavericks on a 5-game winning streak, looking to make it 6 in a row when they take on the San Antonio Spurs. If they're able to get to 6, that would be their longest winning streak of the season. That would put them a season high 9 games above 500. They're currently 31-23, 7th in the West right now, and playing some of the best basketball of the season as they move toward the All-Star break. The additions of Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington have proven to be really good moves so far for the Mavericks, especially a guy in Gafford who is rebounding the heck out of the basketball so far, and Washington providing the versatility on the defensive end that he told me that he wanted to have for the Dallas Mavericks. So things are going well for this team. Can they continue their momentum by beating the Spurs, and then when they come out of the All-Star break, they welcome in Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns, and those 5 games coming out of the break are difficult ones, with games against the Indiana Pacers, the Phoenix Suns, the Boston Celtics, among others. So the Mavericks have a chance to go into the break with some real momentum as they continue to move forward in what has been a difficult Western Conference so far before the All-Star break. You can go look at the Western Conference standings and see how difficult things are to traverse in the West, with the teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets, also the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Pelicans playing extremely good basketball. They've got a chance to be 10 games above 500 for the first time in over 15 years. It just shows you how good and how tight things are in the West. The top 10 seeds right now all have winning records in the Western Conference. So you're going to have an above 500 record, most likely, to get into the play-in situation. And that's where the Mavericks right now find themselves in, and being 7th. You want to obviously be in the top 6 to avoid the play-in altogether. Can the Mavericks find a way to be able to continue to do that and move toward that post-All-Star break? We will find out once we get there. But there's been this strange thing happening over the last few days, and it was highlighted by a segment on ESPN where the topic bar said, quote, "Why don't players want to play with Luka Doncic?" Now, if you go and watch the 3.5 minutes that ESPN had with guys like Richard Jefferson and Brian Windhorst, Malik Andrews, and Chiney Ogwumike hosting the show, you could see that they were actually talking about Spencer Dinwiddie and Kyle Kuzma in relation to what the Mavericks were not able to do in terms of securing Dinwiddie or Kuzma's services, but more so the Washington Wizards and Kuzma's decision to stick in Washington. That was based off of Kyle Kuzma saying that he and the Mavericks apparently are on different timelines, and that Kuzma wants to compete for a championship and apparently doesn't feel like the Mavericks are the best situation to do that. Now, that's interesting because his team was sent to a 7-game losing streak after losing to the Dallas Mavericks on Monday at the American Airlines Center. The Wizards have won a grand total of 9 games so far this year, and they aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Now, if Kuzma had looked us in the face and said, you know what, I want to be the number 1 option on this team. I want to get up my 20 shots a game. I want to continue to make my $19 to $20 million a year and be unbothered by the idea of competing for a championship for the Mavericks, where the Mavericks were just in the Western Conference Finals 2 seasons ago, I would have had a little more respect for that. Because, yes, he's won a championship. And while he's continued to grow as a player, he's gotten more opportunities to showcase the skill set that he has. Let's not get it twisted here. Kyle Kuzma is not in a situation in Washington where they're going to be competing for titles anytime soon. And I don't know that he will be the number 1 option, even if the Kyle Kuzma-led Washington Wizards were able to get to some kind of point in that way, because I don't think Kyle Kuzma is a number 1 option. And maybe that's a failure to realize what he actually is as a player in this league. Good player, solid player who can score, but never will be a true number 1 option on an NBA championship team. So for him to feel like he and the Mavericks are on 2 different pages, I mean, good for him, I guess, based off of the way he feels. But his former teammate, Daniel Gafford, is thriving in Dallas. PJ Washington thriving in Dallas from the Charlotte Hornets so far. But this whole narrative that players don't want to play with Luka Doncic is silly. And to use the examples of a Jalen Brunson, for example, or the fact that the Mavericks moved off of Kristaps Porzingis, or whatever example that you want to use to try and clarify the idea that no one wants to play with Luka Doncic in Dallas is silly. You can look to this past offseason to know that guys don't mind playing in Dallas alongside Luka Doncic because Kyrie Irving signed a 3-year commitment to continue to play in Dallas. And I don't want to hear where folks will say, well, Kevin, if you really looked around at the NBA landscape, Kyrie Irving wasn't going to get that kind of money from any other team across the league, and he knew he could get that from the Mavericks. That's why he went back there. While some of that may be true, most of it, if you look at the way the situation has gone down, Kyrie Irving is extremely comfortable in Dallas. He's been able to be himself, be able to play the kind of brand of basketball that's elevated the offense of the Dallas Mavericks, and more importantly, provided the Mavericks a 1-2 punch at guard that's arguably the best guard duo in the league, with Luka Doncic leading the league in scoring, a top 5 assist man in the league, top 7 in steals so far this year, Doncic being one of the best ISO defenders in the post so far this year, and Irving playing at an extremely high level. So don't give me this stuff that no one wants to play for the Mavericks. Shout out to Richard Jefferson, who in that ESPN clip put on for the Mavericks and said, look, it's a really good basketball culture and a fun place to play in. Even Spencer Dinwiddie clarified his comments about when he decided to choose to play for the Los Angeles Lakers, saying on IG, look, I've stated time and time again that the Mavericks was the most fun place for me to play in my career so far. Nothing I said was shade toward the Mavericks. And for folks who may have felt that way, they apparently got his comments misconstrued. So look, based on everything that we've seen, the successes that guys have had playing with the Mavericks, look at guys like Derrick Jones Jr., Dante Exum, any number of free agents that you want to name that have come through and played for the Mavericks for the most part, they have succeeded playing alongside Luka Doncic. Spencer Dinwiddie being an example as well in the trade from Washington to Dallas as far as that was concerned with the whole Kristaps Porzingis deal. Dinwiddie thrived when he was in Dallas. Reggie Bullock did the same when he was here. While, yes, you didn't have the ultimate success that he wanted, he was a true remembered piece as far as the Mavericks making the Western Conference Finals a couple of years ago. Him and Dorian Finney-Smith played more playoff minutes than any two players in the postseason during that run to the Western Conference Finals. People forget that. So for the Mavericks and for other folks to feel like that there's no reason for others to play with Luka Doncic doesn't make a lot of sense. Guys have had career years and have thrived in Dallas playing alongside Luka. Even Jalen Brunson, who eventually moved on to the New York Knicks, found an opportunity to play for a team, number one, that he's always wanted to play for. He got back to the East Coast. His daddy was an assistant coach on the team, and the Knicks gave him the opportunity to run his own show, and he has taken it and ran with it. And you give Brunson the credit for betting on himself and being willing to do so. It's not necessarily an indictment on playing or not playing with Luka Doncic. Now, if you want to criticize the Mavericks for not necessarily seeing the potential in bringing him back, that's another conversation for another day. And even then, at one point, Jalen Brunson was unplayable during a playoff series against the Los Angeles Clippers, which had questions about whether or not he would be a long-term fit for the Mavericks anyway. But you give him credit for the way that he played in the postseason to get himself in position to earn a contract with the New York Knicks, the lucrative one that he did. Again, that's all credit to Jalen Brunson, not an indictment on playing or not playing or wanting to or not wanting to play with Luka Doncic. So all this to say is this. The conversation is overblown, and it's really completely unnecessary. Anytime you get to play with a top 5 talent in the NBA in Luka Doncic, you're going to be successful as long as you understand the role that you play and understand what is being asked of you night in and night out. And when guys have had the opportunities to do so, they've been able to be successful. That's why Derrick Jones Jr. is having a career year despite his struggles from the three-point line. here recently, other guys will be able to thrive as well. That's why the acquisitions of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford were so important, because you knew with their skill sets and being surrounded with top offensive talent like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, their jobs would be made extremely easier. And you've seen that for Daniel Gafford so far. All he's had to do is be able to rim run, finish at the rim, be able to be the most efficient scorer in terms of field goal percentage in the league. Think about what the Mavericks have done and what the talent that they have on this team now. They've got the number one field goal percentage guy in the league in Daniel Gafford. They've got the number one scoring guy in the NBA in Luka Doncic, a top 5 assist man in Luka. As I mentioned earlier, he's top 7 in steals, and he's also second in the NBA so far is Luka Doncic in three-pointers made. They've got a lot of offensive talent on this team. Now, the question will be, how much more will this team gel together, not only as they finish up against the San Antonio Spurs, but post-All-Star break? And you will get an idea of how much guys like to play with Luka. Talking with PJ Washington, he loves playing with Luka Doncic and playing with Kyrie Irving, and it's only been a couple of games for him. Daniel Gafford has been glowing about the idea of playing with Luka and Kyrie and how easy it's been for him so far. Other guys who have played here or even spent short times here laud and loved what they saw and played with Luka Doncic. Even JJ Redick, who was here for a hot cup of coffee, knows the kind of work ethic that Luka Doncic puts into his game and enjoyed being with him and being around him. So don't play into the narrative that folks don't want to play with Luka, that no one wants to be here around him. You've seen the results of when guys have played here and how much success that they ultimately have had. Can the Mavericks now turn what it seems like a corner and continue to build on what they have so far in the last 5 and hopefully 6 games as far as their win streak is concerned? And then post All-Star break, continue that same building toward hopefully the top 6 of the West. But I wouldn't sweat it when it comes to Kyle Kuzma or Spencer Dinwiddie, no matter how you felt about their comments. The Mavericks have the guys in the room who they believe will lead them to what they believe is a top 6 team and possibly as high as the top 4 if they can get there. And don't worry about Luka Doncic in terms of his MVP discussion. The MVP narrative and the way that it's built year after year, you see how much team success is needed in order to push a guy's candidacy. You look at the top 3 guys right now as far as the MVP straw poll that ESPN put out when it comes to Giannis, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Nikola Jokic. 2 of those guys play on 2 of the top teams in the West, and of course the Milwaukee Bucks, one of the best teams in the NBA. Luka Doncic, while he has continued to put up the eye-popping, eye-gouging numbers so far this season, as we've detailed a little bit already, the team success and how much more that they can have will allow that narrative to get pushed. Luka will always be a top 5 and a perennial MVP candidate. There will be no doubt about that throughout the rest of his career. But what we've got to stop doing is moving the goalposts when it comes to how we define what an MVP is and what he should be doing in order to achieve such success based off of what that player is doing in a particular year. Because the way that we assign it, whether it be Russell Westbrook and the MVP that he won, Nikola Jokic getting an MVP based on the fact that he was able to get his team and drag a Nuggets team into the playoffs a couple of seasons ago or a few seasons ago, however long it's been, it feels like at this point, because it all runs together, it feels like now. The point being, the Mavericks team success will define what Luka will be in terms of an MVP candidate. His numbers are good enough. His impact is infinite. The 73 points is enough to keep him in the top 3 of the MVP discussion altogether, no matter how you feel about NBA defense these days. All of this to say is Luka is an NBA MVP candidate. He should be treated as such. And the push for his candidacy begins now, even more so than the fact that he's already had 2 eye-dropping pot games. I can't even talk the way he's played so far this year. With the 50-point game that he had against the Phoenix Suns on Christmas Day, the 73-point game that he had against the Atlanta Hawks, you get my drift here. He's got me tongue-tied. But at the same time, the Mavericks, the way that they're playing, the team success that they are having, he will be right there when it matters when it comes to the MVP candidacy. So don't worry about that either. Luka Doncic is one of the 5 best players in the league. And yes, he will be eligible for a 5-year, $367 million projected contract when he makes another All-NBA team. He will be on the first team All-NBA team this year again. So for all of you that are concerned about whether or not he may leave or not, you think my man's going to turn down $73.4 million on average for a 5-year span to go somewhere else? Nah, man. Luka's not going anywhere, in my humble opinion. But it's up to the Mavericks to continue to not only define who they are as a team on the court, but off the court as well. Patrick Dumont, the new Mavericks governor, speaking with the Dallas Morning News, offered a clear line of path and thinking on how the Mavericks organizational structure will look. Obviously, for the Mavericks, it will be about Patrick Dumont as the governor of the team. Also, Mark Cuban being a front office voice for the Mavericks. But Dumont saying to the Dallas Morning News that Nico Harrison is clearly the GM and the head of basketball operations. That should give you a pretty good idea on how things should move forward here. Dumont will have final say on basketball decisions when it comes to what is presented to him, but GM and the head of basketball operations, Nico Harrison, is going to be making the moves and presenting those ideas with a valued front office voice in Mark Cuban, who, yes, is an alternate governor for the team. So hopefully that provides some clarification on what's going to happen going forward here. The Mavericks having a clear organizational vision for how their front office looks. Hopefully that permeates down to the head coach and Jason Kidd and the vision that he has for this team for the rest of the season going forward, as well with the acquisitions of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford and how this team continues to hopefully get healthy. Derek Lively hopefully returning very soon with his broken nose. Obviously, the amount of broken noses that this team has between Maxi Kleber, Luka Doncic, and Derek Lively so far this year has been kind of wild to see. But health, good fortune, and chemistry and continuity are what the Mavericks are going to be looking for the rest of the year. If they can get it, this is a team that can be extremely dangerous. I've said it before. You've heard others say it, but I will continue to emphasize it here. The Mavericks are a team that you do not want to see come playoff time. Top 2 offensive talents in Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, a seemingly growing chemistry with the guys that are there, the new additions with versatile guys like PJ Washington and the rebounding machine that is Daniel Gafford so far, a sensational rookie campaign so far from Derek Lively II, and hopefully continued health going forward that allows this lineup to be solidified going forward, and the emergence of Josh Green and the way that he's played over the last month with his consistency knocking down shots from the outside, especially from the corners and 3, but also finishing in transition. And with the defensive versatility that Maxi Kleber has been able to show, especially when you saw in the Washington game where they overcame an 11-point fourth quarter deficit to outscore the Wizards 34-16 to get that win, Maxi Kleber being able to play the small ball 5 when they decided to move to that lineup with Kyle Kuzma at the 5 for Washington. You're seeing how things are coming together. They've got to find a way to get within that top 16, 17 defensively for the rest of the year. And you've seen over the last couple of weeks, they've been able to put together much better defensive effort. That can't stop for the rest of the year. The Mavericks know that where they want to go has to start on the defensive end, and Luka Doncic leading that charge. Yes, your superstar, Luka Doncic, leading that charge. And if he can, now we're talking about something completely different when it comes to this team. But again, don't get caught up in all this other stuff, all this ancillary noise about what the Mavericks are, what they're not, who wants to play with Luka, who doesn't want to play with Luka, who's on a timeline to win here, who isn't on a timeline. Don't worry about any of that stuff. The Mavericks feel like they're finally starting to solidify some things about who they want to be as a team. And that's most important here for guys to have a collective vision to move forward and to execute it on a night-to-night basis. Watch the habits of this team. Watch the way that they play on the defensive end. Are they diving on the floor for loose balls, getting into passing lanes, causing deflections, getting steals, rebounding, finishing off possessions, and are they able to execute on the offensive end? If you're watching that kind of team play in and night out, you should feel good about the direction that this team is going and believing in the vision that Jason Kidd and this organization has for this team. And that, to me, is going to be paramount moving forward here. Do they believe in what collectively they are building? I believe that they do. And I believe that they're starting to put the pieces in place to execute it on a consistent night-to-night basis. Block out whomever does and doesn't want to be here and shut out the noise if you're the Mavericks. Focus on the task at hand and continue to put yourself in position where you're sending a message to the rest of the West that you're not to be messed with, because nobody wants to mess with this team from Texas. Appreciate you joining me here on this latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, download and subscribe to the Inside the Mavs podcast wherever you get podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. You can also follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Like and comment on this video. Let me know your thoughts on how you feel about the Mavericks as they head toward the All-Star break. And I'll talk to you on the next episode of Inside the Mavs. I'll talk to you later. Peace.